well, very good. So a meeting of the MAG Regional Council is now called to order. Melissa, could you do a roll call for us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Regional Council. I'll call your name. Please unmute and indicate if you're present. Mayor Barney.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Biennial.
Here, and welcome back, Chair Wires.
Thank you. President Burnett. Mayor Carlett.
Have to be
Here. Thank you. Jen Daniels. Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego. Mayor Giles.
Here.
Thank you. Supervisor Goodman. Mayor Hall. Mayor Hartkey.
Here.
Thank you. President Javier. Mayor Hermosillo.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor LaVault.
Yes, good morning. I'm here.
Good morning. Thank you. Mayor Lord. Mayor Molina.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Osborne.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Ortega.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Pereira.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Bridget Peterson. Mayor Les Peterson.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Price.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Riggs. Vice Mayor Rizzi from Apache Junction.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Rodriguez. Mayor Schoaf.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Smith.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Walter. Mayor Weiss.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Woods. And our chair is present. Is there anyone that I missed? So we do have a quorum.
From the town of Gilbert is here.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Peterson. A quorum is present.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Do we have any speaker cards?
Mr. Chair, thank you. We've received no comments for this item or any other item on the agenda.
Okay, perfect. So we have no public comment. We will scoot on to the Executive Director's report, item number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the MAG Regional Council. If we go to the next slide, I have 3 things to share with you today. We received a grant with our partnering agency, ADOT and McDOT, on a Keeping Work Zones Safe for Drivers grant, $200,000. It's to implement smart work zones across the region. It's going to focus on message signs to warn drivers as they approach work zones using both our message boards above the freeways as well as portable signs, and improved listings of 14,000 work zones on ADOT's AZ 511 travel information system. So it'll be a great addition so people can avoid construction zones in the future. Go to the next slide. Happy to announce this Friday from 1 to 2:30, we're going to have a virtual Arizona Mega Region Council webinar. So please sign up for that. You can, there's a contact there, Elsa Belgine of our staff can help you get signed up for that, featuring City of Phoenix, Pinal County, City of Hermosillo, and City of San Luis in Mexico, as well as U.S. Council General in Hermosillo will be joining us, as well as Mexican Council General in Phoenix. So that's this Friday, 1 to 2:30. That is a virtual meeting. Go to the next slide. Also happy to announce that we have our results from our annual audit. We received a clean audit without any findings. The audit firm Heinfeld Melch audited our financial statements and federal awards for the fiscal year ended last June. And we also finalized our CAFR, our comprehensive annual financial report. It was finalized just last week and submitted to the Government Finance Officers Association for review. And hopefully we'll get another award on that. So Mr. Chair, that completes my Executive Director's report today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from your council? Okay, very good. I guess we'll move on to item number 4, approval of our consent agenda. The next item is the approval of that. Items 4A through 4F are on your consent agenda. Any member of our regional council have questions or request a presentation on any of the items individually? Very good. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Mayor Harkey.
Okay, I have a motion from Mayor Harkey. How about a second?
I'll second it.
And a second from Mr. Peterson. We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Melissa, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Regional Council. I'll call your name. Please unmute and indicate how you vote. Mayor Barney?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Bienwillner?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Carlett?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Dickey?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Giles?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Hall? Mayor Harkey?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Hermosillo?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor LaVault?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Lord?
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Molina?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Osborne?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Ortega?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Pereira?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Bridget Peterson?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Les Peterson?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Price?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Riggs? Vice Mayor Rizzi?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Rodriguez?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Schoaf?
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Smith?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Woods?
Aye.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, how do you vote?
Before I vote,
Mhm.
our attorneys are going to bring this up if I don't. Mayor Lord voted present, so did she want to vote present or was she thinking it was a roll call for her being here?
Yes.
Okay, all right, I want to be clear. So Mayor Lord votes aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed?
Okay, well, I need to vote myself now.
Okay, go ahead, Mr.
I
Chair.
want to clarify, Mayor Lord did vote aye, is that correct?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, very good. And the chair votes aye.
thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? That agenda item passes unanimously.
All right, very good, thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 5, update on regional homeless initiatives. Meg Deputy Director Amy St. Peter. Amy?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. We appreciate this opportunity to present. The purpose of our presentation today will be to offer you an update on our activities to develop the portfolio of regional strategies that will come forward for your action in May. We will also be responding to the request received at last month's regional council meeting about funding. We'll be sharing a report that was recently developed by the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care, as well as offering some data on evictions as an example of this work moving forward. Next slide, please. One of our highest priorities in all of this work then is to ensure that all communities throughout the region have an opportunity to provide the assistance that people need to survive. This will help to reduce the numbers of people who are experiencing homelessness, as well as increase the safety net for all people. Next slide, please. We have been basing the development of the portfolio on the most effective practices nationally as well as locally. These efforts are being formed by extensive outreach to diverse audiences, as well as extensive research into different areas of focus. These strategies are being further filtered and prioritized on the basis of the draft regional goals that were distributed with your meeting materials today. An example of a strategy that is being considered right now is the development of a regional system of local shelters. We're finding that it's incredibly important to coordinate activity at the regional level in order to provide the maximum benefit at that local level. Next slide, please. This is our progress made to date since our last presentation to you in January. Thanks to your support, we've touched more than 1,000 people so far in terms of our outreach and in terms of the surveys to first responders and to local law enforcement. In terms of the outreach, we've heard from the nonprofit community, business community, faith leaders, housing experts, and philanthropy. We hope that your municipal staff will attend the staff forum next Tuesday on March 30th, and we do hope that you'll join us on April 14th for the elected official forum. We will be sharing the draft of the prioritized strategies with you at that time, as well as the framework that we've used to prioritize those strategies. In terms of the studies underway, the site and consideration study is nearly complete. We're very eager to share this work with you, particularly as communities are considering launching new homeless assistance programs in their areas. The second study is the municipal spending analysis. Sapna Gupta from our team has been working very closely with your staff and with Applied Economics to collect the data that will be needed to conduct this study. We have not yet heard from all communities. We do think the communities that have worked with us to date. We are hoping to hear from all of you so that we can accurately represent the investments that you are making to address homelessness. We'll be sharing the results of this study at next month's Regional Council meeting. Sutton is also working with the Arizona Housing Coalition to gather and analyze the FY21 COVID relief funding. We see this as an important funding source for implementing the strategies that are under development right now. We'll provide this analysis at next month's Regional Council meeting as well. The portfolio is under development right now thanks to the assistance received from a strategy team. This strategy team includes the representatives from the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care Board, ASU's Action Nexus and Valley of the Sun United Way as members of the Regional Collaborative on Homelessness, our consultants, Homebase, and the Corporation for Supportive Housing, as well as MAG staff, as we work diligently to prioritize the strategies and to gather the final data points needed. Next slide, please. These are the results from the law enforcement and first responder survey that are now available on the MAG's website. This is just a sampling of that. We were asked to look into the role of law enforcement because we want to provide consistency and to elevate best practices throughout the entire region. As you can see, both groups cited the same top 3 roles for them in their work in addressing homelessness, but they varied in terms of what they saw as their primary role. First responders clearly see their primary role as meeting the emergency needs of people who are experiencing homelessness, while law enforcement tends to connect people directly with assistance. We're eager to move forward with these results as we fine-tune the regional strategies that are under development, as well as ongoing work to make sure that we can replicate great practices that are underway right now in your local communities and to regionalize them and to be able to achieve maximum benefit and consistency throughout the region. Next slide, please. These are the next steps as we drive toward the development of that regional portfolio, which will be presented to you in May for your action. We do encourage your feedback throughout this entire process. In particular, it would be very helpful if you can help us to connect and to present to your city councils. We're scheduled right now to present to 4 different city councils. We see this as a critical component of ensuring that we have a broad basis of support for these strategies, and we would welcome any other invitations to present to your city councils. As we prepare this work for your action and for implementation then, it's important to consider at least 2 different elements. One of those is funding. At last month's Regional Council meeting, we're asked very specifically about funding, and we will be talking about that analysis from the municipal spending study at next month's Regional Council meeting. But as we move forward, it's important to consider that we'll need a multi-sector approach to be able to fund these regional strategies. We envision that will include both public as well as private investments, particularly from the philanthropic community as well. And so we encourage you to consider what you might be able to allocate in terms of your budgets to be able to implement these strategies moving forward. The second element to consider and keep in mind as this work unfolds is accountability. We need to make sure that we have a forum as well as a mechanism for monitoring progress and for holding ourselves accountable for implementing the strategies that we'll be moving forward with in the future. There are a number of different ways that we can address these 2 elements, and we look forward to delving into these opportunities with you as the work unfolds. Next slide, please. So as we've undertaken this work, we have assembled a significant amount of data. We want to make sure that these data are available to you on an ongoing basis. So our regional analytics team has developed this new interactive map. This is currently under review, but is anticipated to be completed by next month. As you can see right now, we're featuring the locations of the different homeless assistance programs that are located throughout the entire region. That is an important element to consider as we develop these strategies. The other element that will be added to this map will be the concentrations of people who are experiencing homelessness right now, as well as the populations who are at risk of becoming homeless in the future. And so we want to make sure that you have the tools and the data that you'll need on an ongoing basis to support your local efforts as we coordinate activities at that regional level. Next slide, please. A new landing page has been developed on our MAG website thanks to our communication team. It provides all of the data and information that has been assembled right now and incorporates a diverse perspectives. We particularly want to thank your municipal human services directors. We've been working very closely with them throughout this process, and we hope to further engage you and your staff as this work unfolds. We do encourage you to visit the website and to let us know of any questions about anything that you might find on the website, anything that you might like to see on it, as well as any other feedback that you have about these efforts. At this time, I would like to transition now to Nikki Stevens. She works with the City of Tempe and has been instrumental in furthering our work in racial equity and homelessness. She's been supported in these efforts by the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care, particularly working with Samantha Jackson from the Downtown Phoenix Partnership, supported very well by Julie Montoya on our team, as well as by our consultants, Racial Equity Partners. At this point, we'd like to move forward to the next slide and transition the presentation over to Nikki. Nikki, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, thank you all for welcoming me to present to you regarding race and homelessness in Maricopa County. As she said, I'm Nikki Stevens. I'm the Homeless Solutions Supervisor for the City of Tempe. I'm excited to present to you some of the work that's been done, and I want to just thank MAG for their leadership regarding this work and how important it's been to the entire community. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to kind of go over, and I know I only have a little bit of time and this is a complicated subject. So kind of how we got here is we were looking at the point in time count numbers. So they would come in year after year. So we started to look at the disparities that were occurring within our the populations that we serve. So if you could look at the county overview of race with, particularly Black compared to white and Native American populations. As you can see, the county overview of the Black population and the Native population, we have the Black population about a little over 6%, and they actually go into the homeless system about 32% of the time. And that's also holds true for our Native American populations as well, where we're seeing them at 7% of that total population when they are entering our homeless system. Next slide, please. So what we did was work with our racial equity partners in analyzing some of this data regarding our HMIS system. We held focus groups with people of color with lived experience of homelessness, and this included a wide variety of individuals, singles, families, and youth as well, ages 18 to 24. We did hold group interviews with community stakeholders and got feedback from them regarding some of the work that's being done through coordinated entry and other aspects of their homeless response system. We also did a survey, and we had about 240 responses to that online survey, and that went to our direct service providers, leadership, board members, funders of homeless services. And we also have been reviewing our policies and procedures in our homeless response system, especially through the coordinated entry system, that's where individuals and families go through to actually get their homeless needs met. And we reviewed all of those policies and procedures to make sure they were equitable. Next slide, please. So as you can see, African Americans are Black people experiencing homelessness at a 3.9 times greater than their actual population themselves. Native Americans, as I pointed out earlier as well, there are more than double of their actual general population. And we found that Hispanic and Latino peoples were underrepresented among those experiencing homelessness, and the same with white and Asian Americans as well. Next slide, please. So some of the points regarding a lot of the information that we've collected is, the public perceptions of homelessness are grounded in negative stereotypes. We know that they assume people experiencing homelessness are lazy or unmotivated, and they're there by choice. Many of the people that we serve perceive that there was racial bias in the current assessment system that we have and the prioritization within our coordinated entry system. African Americans and Latino peoples had actually experienced homelessness for more days on average than do white or Native American populations. And then people of color are more likely than their white peers to return to homelessness. And I found this especially true when I was serving families experiencing homelessness. I was, I also used to work at Save the Family, and we would see people of color, mostly Black and Native populations that would have higher returns to homelessness, especially through our rapid rehousing programs. We know that there's racial disparities within our housing and criminal justice system that sometimes drive these rates of homelessness among people of color, and that our court system doesn't do a really good job of tracking evictions by race or ethnicity. And that's something I think Maggie's going to present on. Maggie Wong from MAG is going to present on that after this, which is exciting to see that data coming forward as well. The homelessness workforce is actually really diverse, and we have 47% of the workforce is racially diverse, and 40% of the executive leaders and board members identified as people of color, which we thought was great. And 36% of the homeless service workforce has personal lived experience of homelessness. I call that personally lived expertise. We know that people with lived experience offer us greater knowledge of homelessness and also help us drive our decisions and our ways that we create policies and procedures around our homelessness response system. Next slide, please. So the road ahead. So we are looking at our coordinated entry system because we know that's where people who experience homelessness enter through. How do we incorporate people with lived experience in creating a homeless response system that's equitable for lived experience and people of color? We are continuing to examine our data. We always talk about making data-driven decisions, and we have the data now, both on the eviction side and on the homeless response system side. So I'm excited that we're going to be making data-driven decisions regarding how we respond to these inequities. We also are working to develop and sustain homeless service workforce organizations that are diverse, inclusive, and committed to anti-racism. Our additional focus will be on prevention and cross-sector collaboration. To Ms. St. Peter's point about the money that's coming into our community, I think it's extremely important we start looking at these inequities and how we respond to those, and making sure that we are presenting something that's going to be able to meet the needs of a diverse group of people. We want to reduce the criminalization of homelessness as well. I want to give a shout out to the city of Tempe and the great response that our officers are really working to create a decriminalization of homelessness. And they do a really great job of working with our outreach teams to make sure that we are going from a human services perspective first, and trying to deliver services first, and criminalization is always the last resort. Housing discrimination, obviously we know that there are some disparities around that, and we are working to address those as well. And I think that's my last slide. And I appreciate the opportunity to present to you all, and if you have any questions, thank you.
Thank you. And at this point in the presentation, we'll transfer over to Maggie from our MAG team to talk about the eviction data, please.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks, Nikki. Good morning, everyone. My name is Maggie Wong. I'm a research analyst at MAG in the Regional Analytics Division. We've been receiving monthly evictions data from the Maricopa County Justice Courts and have some initial analysis of trends to share today. Next slide, please. So first, we'll take a quick look at evictions data since the beginning of last year. So when comparing February of 2020 to February of 2021, there has been a 44% decrease in eviction cases filed. You can see a significant decrease in evictions in March, April, and May, likely due to the start of that eviction moratorium put in place at the beginning of the pandemic. But it did start rising towards the end of the year, with a high in December of over 4,000 eviction filings. And just for reference, prior to the pandemic, monthly evictions were generally around 6,000 filings per month. You can see that the past 2 months in January and February of this year, we've been at just around 3,000, so we're still down from pre-pandemic numbers. As Nikki mentioned before, the court's eviction data itself is limited on demographics, but what we've done is we've paired it with census data from the American Community Survey and started to estimate based on block groups. So this provides additional analysis on demographic characteristics in the areas where these evictions are taking place. Next slide, please. So we are finding that over 60% of 2020 eviction filings were in areas with high minority population. This map of Maricopa County is showing evictions as dots, with evictions in block groups that have a minority population of over 50% in that bright turquoise color. The other gray dots represent all other evictions from 2020. We actually looked at eviction filings since 2019, and the proportion of evictions in higher minority areas has been consistently over 60% for the past few years, even after the drop in cases from the eviction moratoriums. So although there have been fewer eviction cases in the past year, the percentage in higher minority areas has remained pretty consistent. Next slide, please. We also see that 79% of evictions in 2020 were in lower income areas, which we defined as block groups where the median household income is under $65,000. So on this map, the bright magenta dots show evictions in these lower income areas, with the gray dots showing all other evictions. Next slide, please. The following chart shows a more detailed distribution for 2020 evictions by household income range, again, showing in purple that over 70% of evictions are in those lower income areas. But now you can really see that the majority are in block groups that have a median household income of just $25,000 to $45,000. Next slide, please. And finally, we also see that 62% of evictions in 2020 were in areas with higher poverty, block groups where over 15% of the population is below poverty. So here, the evictions in higher poverty areas are shown on the map as blue dots, with the gray dots showing all other 2020 evictions. Next slide, please. Aside from the Justice Court's data, there is also data related to evictions coming from the Household Pulse Survey put out by the US Census Bureau. And this survey samples responses on household experiences during the coronavirus pandemic, including housing challenges. So right here, we're looking at the most recent data for February 17th through March 1st of this year. 24% of survey respondents in the Phoenix metro area reported that they are not confident in their ability to pay next month's rent. And this can be compared to 22% of respondents in Arizona and 27% of total respondents in the US. So for the Phoenix metro area, that's 12% reporting no confidence and another 12% reporting only slight confidence in their ability to make next month's rent. Next slide, please. Another question that's asked is, for respondents who are not current on rent, what is the likelihood of eviction in the next 2 months? In the Phoenix metro area, over 59% of survey respondents reported a likelihood of eviction. And this can be compared to also 59% in the entire state of Arizona and 48% of respondents in the US. So in the Phoenix metro area, that's 28% saying that an eviction is very likely and 31% reporting that an eviction is somewhat likely. We do want to note that this percentage is down from the end of last year. So back at the beginning of November, 70% of respondents in the Phoenix metro area reported a likelihood of eviction. We've mainly been tracking these two data tables from the Household Pulse Survey related to evictions, but there are also other questions related to education, employment, food security, healthcare, and more. Next slide, please. So that wraps up our summary of eviction trends in the region. We have a variety of other data tools available at maps.azmag.gov and data.azmag.gov. We're also continuing to look into different types of analysis using the evictions data along with data on homelessness in the region, and look forward to sharing more in the future. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the MAG Regional Council. That does conclude our presentation on our regional homelessness efforts at this point. We do look forward to continuing this conversation with you. Mr. Chairman, if you have any questions or if you'd like to open the floor to questions, we would be happy to take those as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Amy. Maggie, you guys did a really good job, extremely thorough. So thank you so much. I know there's an awful lot going on, and this isn't a problem we're all going to solve quickly. It's going to take a while. It's going to take everybody all working together to make it happen. So are there any questions from our council?
Mr. Chair, it's Ken Weiss.
Go ahead, sir.
So I have a question regarding race and homelessness, and I'm hoping I could get just some clarification on a couple items. So in 2013, ASU did a pretty comprehensive study on homelessness in Arizona and the Valley, and they listed the top 4 things that cause homelessness, ranging from economic, family issues, health, and substance abuse. And I'm wondering if those same issues exist across all racial lines, or if they're differentiated based on race, or if they kind of stay consistent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mayor Weiss and members of the MAG Regional Council, I'd like to turn it over to Nikki Stevens to address that question.
I apologize, Amy. So right now, we do not have data that we can point to that states that we can, say that we know anecdotally that, people use substances across racial lines about the same rates. But we know there may be an uptick of more criminalization of people of color who utilize substances than other populations. Does that make sense?
It does. And the only reason I asked that is because you brought up the Native American population. And in this study, it was indicated that alcoholism in that group is higher and a higher cause of homelessness. So I'm just wondering, I guess my question would be is, if we're trying to address the issues of homelessness and what causes them, it'd be good to know what are the reasons, especially when it comes to family issues. One of the biggest reasons was cited was family violence across all sectors. And it'd be good to kind of know where we need to attack these issues, and agreed that we should be addressing the issue of homelessness first. But I guess the long range plan, and I know what's going on, would be to address the root causes of that and finding out. My assumption is that not every racial group has the same proportion of reasons of why they're homeless. So it'd be interesting to get some more information on that and see what kind of factor substance abuse plays in that role, family violence, family issues, unemployment. It'd be interesting to see how it plays across all racial lines.
Yes, and I agree with you. And I think that creating safety nets in our community that keep people from becoming homeless is a great point that you're bringing up, and creating more strengths around case management and support of individuals if they experience homelessness, or if they, once their family gets into a homeless program, how do we support them to make sure they don't return to homelessness as well?
Understood. And Amy, if it's okay with you, I'll send you the link for the study. I don't have the woman from Tempe's email address, but I'll send it to you if you don't mind sharing it with your team.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mayor Weiss. We would be happy to receive that and to really integrate that into the data that's being analyzed right now for the purposes of these efforts moving forward. We thank you very much for that.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego. We in the city of Phoenix have been blessed to be recipients of ARPA money, and so many different flows of federal money are coming into our community. So I wanted to ask staff how best they thought we might coordinate on regional projects or making sure we are going in the same direction as a region.
Mr. Chairman, members of the MAG Regional Council, and Mayor Gallego, thank you very much for that question. We are very diligently assessing the funding that is coming into the region right now, as well as the expenditures being made by our local communities. We will be coming forward with a report on that analysis at next month's Regional Council meeting, and that would be a very good time to talk about how we may best coordinate at that regional level. We understand that we have significant opportunities right now to be able to address these efforts. We also have significant needs, and so we want to make sure that we're investing all of the funding that's coming into the region in the best places possible, and doing so in a coordinated fashion throughout the region.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. So that does conclude item number 5. Item number 6 is a discussion of the development of the fiscal year 22-23 MAG Biennial Unified Planning Work Program and Budget. That's like a mouthful. Amy from MAG's Fiscal Division will give this report also.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the MAG Regional Council. MAG is currently in the process of developing the Biennial Unified Planning Work Program and Budget document for fiscal years 2022 and 2023. The UPWP includes a description of the planning work and resulting products, who will perform the work, the timeframes for completing it, the costs for the work, and the sources of the funds. MPOs are required to develop UPWPs to govern work programs for the expenditure of FHWA and FTA planning funds. During this process, MAG updates member agencies monthly, with the final draft presented in May for approval. In January, MAG provided a draft of the proposed member dues and assessments, as well as the budget production timeline. In February, MAG presented a draft of the proposed new products. projects. And this month, Meg is presenting a first draft of the narrative style sections of the document and financial information for new projects and labor. During March, Meg's staff has been working on finalizing the budget amounts that will be presented for review in April, which will also be presented at the biennial meeting of the Intermodal Planning Group, which includes ADOT, FTA, and FHWA certified planning process on April 15th. That concludes my update for this process, and I'll be happy to answer any questions or take any comments.
I guess you did a good job. Okay, very good. There's no action needed on this item today. So with that said, we'll move on to agenda item number 7 is an update on the development of the new regional transportation plan. Meg's transportation staff, Audra Kester Thomas, will begin this discussion. Audra?
Thank you, and good to see you, Chairman Wires, members of the Regional Council. Pleased to be back to provide an update on the latest developments of the next regional transportation plan to inform the extension of Proposition 400. Next slide. This will largely cover the work that the Management Committee Work Group heard in our previous month. This was presented as well as Management Committee and Transportation Policy Committee last week. Our focus today is on bus transit, largely building from conversations we initiated last fall. We do want to differentiate this presentation. We're focused today on bus transit. For purposes of scenario development, we also, of course, have high capacity transit elements. As policymakers have guided us through this effort, we are continuing to use the Prop 400 era assumption that high capacity transit rail operations would continue to be funded at the local level. Next slide. Included in your agenda packet today was a brief 2 memos that outlined these conversations. You'll recognize this flow chart, if you will, that talks to the complexities of bus transit. Not only are there a few different functions of capital investment that enable bus service in a region, but we also have the complexities of operations as well. For today's presentation, we'll be hitting each of these key components with a review of existing policy and then our proposed recommended policy moving forward. Next slide. Let's first start with bus capital. Bus replacement at the top of our list here, probably not as well known, but an incredibly important regional investment out of Proposition 400 was the region's support for fleet replacement, bus replacements. The cost is picked up wholly by the region. We leverage our 5307 federal FTA funding for 80% of the cost, and then use PTF or sales tax funding for the match of 20%. Because of the important value that this provides the region, we're recommending this policy continue forward. Transit asset management has been a conversation ongoing. We've talked a lot about it last fall. As part of Proposition 400, there wasn't a dedicated funding source for TAM or transit asset management components. We're recommending taking a longer term planning approach, starting to look at things from a life cycle cost, coordinating those efforts with our largest transit providers, notably the City of Phoenix and Valley Metro. Preventative maintenance, for those who have staff in transit, you'll hear this referred to as PM. We allocate 25% currently of our FTA 5307 funds towards preventative maintenance. What this does is lower the cost of service that those of you who purchase service from a provider, ultimately lowers the cost of that service. It's an important value, and from a grant management perspective, a highly efficient use of our federal funds. We continue to recommend this policy move forward. And then park and rides and transit centers, we did have discrete locations and investments identified in Proposition 400. We're recommending transitioning to a longer term approach, coordinating those planning activities with our commuter service planning, setting aside funding for future park and rides or transit centers, and really helping to better, from a multimodal perspective, align some of these investments potentially with even freeway investments, recognizing that HOV lanes, DHOV investments, park and rides adjacent to these freeway facilities are really valuable. Next slide. Moving on to regional service, we'll start with commuter bus. Currently, we have 2 branded services, Express Bus and Rapid Service from the City of Phoenix. These are funded directly out of the allocations given to member agencies or through local funds. Starting about 2 years ago, when member agencies requested that MAG initiate a study on commuter bus and then carried through forward into the RTP call for projects, there was a lot of feedback that we take a regional approach to commuter bus. While all destinations end currently in Central Phoenix, we anticipate emerging markets to occur, and the unique aspects of commuter bus that have a distinct origin and destination pattern that's highly regional, crossing multiple jurisdictions, we see an opportunity to move this service to a regionally funded one. Next slide. The other key regional service is ADA paratransit. Currently, reimbursements are funded through Prop 400. This was one of those key components. Out of the Prop 400 era funding, we're recommending continuation of regional support for ADA, but we really want to align and pull together a regional definition for ADA service that would apply across bus service region. This program was probably one of the most talked about during our work group a few weeks ago. There's a high sensitivity to cost containment and emphasis that we need to align with the federal minimum standard of ADA and find the most cost-effective ways to provide this very important but very costly service in the region. Next slide. Moving then on to bus service and operating assistance specifically. Currently, there is set aside funding from PTF that is a fixed allocation distributed to some member agencies. Known as JE or jurisdictional equity, this fixed allocation stays constant. As we started this conversation last fall, MAG is recommending moving to a formula-based, demand-driven approach where allocations are calculated annually based on actual data and service outputs. Next slide. There are several options. Industry standard typically includes vehicle revenue miles and passengers or some sort of proxy for boardings. This is seen consistently across the country. We would recommend having at least these 2 criteria included as well. We continue to evolve this concept to present as part of the scenarios later this spring. But our conversation at the work group also recognized that there are some other regional outcomes that we want to achieve, acknowledging that there are some service areas that in order to get to may cover what we call dead miles, where there won't be passengers or service, but also that there are other outcomes that we want to achieve, those that are highly focused with environmental justice, recognizing that there are populations that very much value a transit option if they're transit dependent in particular. And so those important outcomes we want to also consider as part of a formula. Next slide. Recognizing local funding is really important as we move forward. It will continue to be instrumental in enabling any sort of regional transit investment in this region. City of Phoenix certainly has a considerable amount of funding to enable transit already. In talking in ongoing conversations with the City of Phoenix, their rapid branded commuter bus service would continue to be funded by the City of Phoenix, that they'd continue to receive an allocation that is consistent with coming out of the Proposition 400 policy, and would continue to receive ADA paratransit reimbursement from the region as well. Next slide. And taken in whole then, looking forward, our recommendation for operating assistance for bus transit is that baseline funding allocations coming out of Proposition 400 would be maintained. Policymakers, particularly our managers, had echoed to us how important this allocation is to move forward as a baseline assumption. Therefore, any additional funding above that baseline allocated to bus service would then be applied through our formula. Recognizing that that formula allocation would be modified or adjusted every year or every 2 years, we want to be very cognizant that we align that with local budgets, recognizing that local funding will continue to be important. We want to make sure that we are aligning with your own budget development and prepare for ultimate future service decisions. Also, really from a regional perspective, we're fairly young in our regional transit investment. And as we continue our rapid growth in this region, expect that new and emerging transit markets will occur in the next 10, 20, 30 years. Therefore, MAG is also recommending that we set aside an additional pot of funding where we can help and partner with member agencies to test potential transit service to better understand if there's underlying transit demand that could otherwise then move into our overall regional transit portfolio. We see this as an opportunity to help new and emerging markets, member agencies who are not yet invested in transit, but see an opportunity in the future. Next slide. We still have some details to work out. We'll be bringing back better information on how a formula could be applied as part of our scenario development here this spring. Our next work groups, we have 2 coming up in the next 2 weeks. Our next work group is tomorrow afternoon. Our focus there will be on the polling results. We were out of the field at the end of last month and are feverishly pulling together the analysis of some of the key findings. Will be focused on that tomorrow afternoon. And then on April 6th, we'll be discussing and unveiling the draft scenarios, answering key questions, which will really take up the lion's share of work ultimately this spring. Next slide. Taking a look at what we have ahead, as I've mentioned to Management Committee and the Transportation Policy Committee, we're really at a crescendo, if you will, of this planning process. With the development of scenarios, which we will release in April, the next several months will be focused on going from a couple alternatives down to a preferred alternative so that we can move ultimately this fall through our air quality conformity process with a plan adoption by the end of the year, moving for enabling legislation starting in January. Next slide. So just recognition that we have some heavy weeks and months ahead where we'll be asking for your partnership in reviewing dense material in some cases. The work of a plan, our key investments, our programmatic strategies just aren't lines on a map, and recognize that this will be a lot of information for your staff and your team to review over the course of the next months. Our focus in April will be to review the draft scenarios for your consideration. Again, these are fiscally constrained now. We've gone from an unconstrained universe of potential options, and we'll be presenting you now those that we can afford within a budget of either a half cent or up to 1 cent. We'll expect and encourage lots of questions and discussion, reflections on not only these scenarios, but the key trade-offs therein. We'll also outline some of the key policy assumptions included to enable each of these scenarios. In May, we'll ask for and begin development of direction on where a preferred scenario should be. Of course, part of that will also be direction on a potential tax rate. It is fundamental to what we can and cannot afford. And so by May, we'll need reflections on what feels comfortable in terms of a proposed tax rate. And then in June, deliver a draft preferred scenario based on feedback from our member agencies and policymakers, in hopes that this summer we can reach consensus on the key projects and programmatic investments to develop a plan and go through our air quality conformity process. Chairman Wires, that completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, this is Kathy Carlett. I have a question.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Audra, thank you, as usual, for a great presentation. If you wouldn't mind going back to your slide titled Capital, I have a question that I just need some clarification on. Okay, so we've talked about the transition toward long-term planning away from what jurisdictional equity? Is that what transit asset management?
Mayor Wires, Mayor Carlett, members of Regional Council, transit asset management hasn't had a comprehensive approach taken in bus transit. And now that there is a federal requirement that the RTP also has to adhere to and report our work towards the maintenance of those federal investments, we're recommending taking a longer range approach, particularly one that focuses on life cycle costs of investments. I think the example we like to use a lot at MAG is fare box specifically. You may or may not be aware the region's currently investing in a modernization of our fare boxes, moving more towards a modern technology that will hopefully address some of our compliance issues, but also provide a more modern operation to our fare boxes, digital ticketing, for example. That was not planned for in Proposition 400. We did not have funding set aside for those activities. Those are clearly important regional investments that we want to make sure we do a better job planning for in the future. And therefore, setting aside funding for those sorts of investments is the approach that we would like to take, but coordinated specifically with the transit providers, notably City of Phoenix and Valley Metro.
Okay, so will this future policy be part of your scenarios as we make our final decisions coming up in April and May?
Mayor Wires, Mayor Carlett, members of Regional Council, absolutely will be detailing each of these key policies, not only to distribute the funding available, but then the key assumptions associated with each of these components.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you have any other questions? Anybody? Okay, very good. Thank you so much. I guess we'll go ahead and move on to, where are we at? Item number 7, I believe. No, we just did item 7. Item number 8, legislative update, MAG policy and government relations director, Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Regional Council. Next slide, please. Today's legislative update is going to focus on federal issues that are going on. No surprise, with a new Congress and new administration, we're seeing a lot of activity of proposed law, policy, programmatic, and funding changes. So I'll start off with the first one, just noting funds coming to the state and region. Of course, backing up to the CRISA, which was adopted, passed in the December timeframe. Transit funding has already been approved and allocated through the MAG process. We are working through the highway portion of that. Tomorrow at the Transportation Review Committee, that will be discussed, really focusing around proposed scenarios around closeout, allocating that $25 million or so to the closeout fund and what that would mean. So those conversations will start tomorrow at TRC and come back at the April Policy Committee meetings for approval, consideration, discussion, and approval. Moving to the ARP funds, of course, was noted in the homeless agenda item. Ms. St. Peter framed it well. Significant funding coming through ARPA on housing, homelessness, rental assistance, focusing down on emergency housing vouchers, emergency rental assistance, of course. So we're tracking that, as was noted in that presentation. Also on the transportation side, significant funding investments going to public transportation. We continue to track those estimates coming to the state and region, working through what that means for the region, of course, working with member agencies and our regional partners, including Valley Metro. And then finally on this item, or this topic rather, the Lift America Act. So this is the discussed infrastructure bill, Leading Infrastructure for Tomorrow's America Act, proposed perhaps some $3 trillion in infrastructure investment. We continue to track those conversations through our national associations, congressional offices, and others. So lots more to come on that front as well. Next slide, please. Also running on the transportation side are conversations on reauthorization. The current surface transportation authorization is set to expire at the end of September of this year. So in addition to all the other notes that I made about infrastructure investment, this is going on as well. As I also noted, we talked to our congressional offices, national associations, and peer agencies in the Intermountain West and our major metros nationwide on reauthorization. Next slide, please. An example of this is recent conversations that were led and coordinated by our peer agency in Chicago. They put together a letter to congressional leadership regarding reauthorization and the role that MPOs play in transportation planning in our respective regions. That letter was signed by Atlanta, Chicago, Philadelphia, Houston, and others. You will see that the Maricopa Association of Governments also signed on. This item was brought to the MAG Executive Committee at its most recent meeting. I had a quick timeline on it. That's why we brought it to the Executive Committee. We've now signed on, and that letter has been sent to congressional leadership. I will note that this has spurred an initial conversation with Senate banking staff. That meeting is being scheduled now. So showing our involvement on this issue and really utilizing our peer major metro areas around the nation in these conversations. Next slide, please. Also on reauthorization, this is an issue that we continue to grapple with. Fast-growing states and funding formulas. Funding formulas direct just that, funding to state and regions. And there's components of those formulas that are of concern to us, most notably using 2000 census data for population in some of the formulas. We have developed an issue paper that has been sent out to member agencies requesting an adjustment to funding formula allocations. We've worked with Congressman Stanton's office on this, letting them know what we're working on. They are grateful for that because in last year, they did propose a study committee to review this issue. Next slide, please. And this really highlights the issue here. While most states are growing to some degree, clearly the states in red, no surprise to this body, Arizona is growing faster than others from the period of 2000 to 2019. Showing the Intermountain West, of course, I know that we are in conversations with the Intermountain West major metro peers as well. Also, Sunbelt states are affected. Next slide, please. And this highlights the population rank change. So Arizona has moved up 6 slots, if you will, in population rank. The green ones are falling behind, if you will. So this poses a challenge when we talk about this nationwide. Obviously, again, in places like the Intermountain West and Sunbelt states are affected. So it's difficult to gain traction on this issue. If you are meeting with your congressional delegation offices, we hope that you will pause and reinforce this issue with them, needing a lot of support around this issue to move this issue forward. We do have a meeting next month with our Intermountain West peers. We'll be discussing this issue. The issue paper has been circulated among our Intermountain West peers for their review and input. So we're hoping to build a coalition of sorts around this issue in the Intermountain West. We'll also be reaching out to Texas and perhaps Florida as well, as they are affected. Next slide, please. And finally, Mr. Chairman, members of the Regional Council, community project funding is a development that's ongoing as well, also known as a return to earmarks, if you will. So we have criteria from Congressman Stanton's office and our national associations and others. This has a quick timeline coming up. Understanding that the portal for submitting these projects by House members will open on March 29th and run through mid-April. House members can submit up to 10 requests, but I think we're managing expectations here about what will be funded and how much funding do we expect to those awarded projects. We are developing a white paper of sorts for member agencies that will be circulated soon, really laying out this criteria as noted in this slide. And the next slide, please. And also just noting that, again, kind of managing expectations to some degree. Clearly, member agencies supporting or submitting projects can get letters of support from MAG for your project application. We've also, in our draft white paper, included some freeway projects which can take funding. Of course, a lot of these are shovel ready as they are on the tip, so we offer that for consideration as well. So, Mr. Chairman, clearly a lot going on the federal front. We continue to be involved in these conversations. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. I especially like that chart showing Arizona in the 6th position. It's an easy chart to understand. Questions from council? Okay, hearing none. Good job, Nathan. Thank you. So we'll move on to item number 9, request by the council. Any council member has an item that they'd like on a future agenda? Hearing none. Are there any comments or announcements from the membership?
Mr. Chair, it's Ken Weiss.
Go ahead, sir.
So I brought this up at executive committee just for all the mayors and members of this committee. The NASCAR race that happened 2 weeks ago, I had a chance to meet with the president of NASCAR and the CEO. I've said this before, they're incredibly happy with the way the Valley responded, not only to the championship race, but to this race. The championship race will be in the Valley again in November. And then after that date, they're still trying to decide. What I'm going to do is have my team send out a form letter to all the mayors and ask them to sign on to it so we can send one unified letter to NASCAR leadership and let them know how much that event means to everyone in the Valley. So I would ask that you guys look for that over the next couple of weeks. And if you don't mind signing on to it, I would really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you. And I appreciate your very gracious host at the event. I certainly enjoyed being there that day. I wish that Mr. McDowell would have came in higher than he did, but local boy, we want him to do well.
Understood, sir.
But good job hosting. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Congratulations to Avondale on a great hosting experience, and then congratulations to Mayor Hartke and Chandler on the big Intel announcements.
Woohoo! Mayor.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a very exciting announcement, and I think this continues to seal the entire Valley as an advanced manufacturing hub, if not capital of the West, and hopefully this will continue to grow across our Valley. So very exciting news with what's happening in North Phoenix, in Chandler, and far more to be happening across this Valley as others come and see what's going on here. So good win for all of us with future wins to come for all of us.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, we all have an awful lot to be proud of. We certainly have the fastest growing state in the nation, but I do think it's a lot to do with all the concerted work that all of us do to try to make the environment that our citizens that we all live in, a better place to live and work and quality of life. So congratulations to everybody. If there's no other things that need to be brought up, business will now be concluded. The meeting's adjourned. I hope you all have a blessed day. Thank you.
Goodbye. Have a great day, everybody.